Navy Major Olivia Carter is pulled over without cause by Officer Mark Henderson on a Texas highway. What starts as a routine traffic stop quickly escalates into a dangerous, unlawful arrest. But Henderson has no idea. His supposed victim is about to turn the hunt against him. The Texas sky was covered in a thin layer of clouds, reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights onto the damp pavement after a late-night drizzle. The clock on the dashboard clicked over to 12:15 a.m. On the empty highway leading toward Houston, the only sounds were the steady hum of an engine and the soft rhythm of jazz playing in Navy Major Olivia Carter's car. After a long deployment, Olivia wanted nothing more than a hot shower and a deep sleep, but her military instincts never rested. A vehicle had been following her for nearly 10 minutes. She checked the rearview mirror. There it was, a white SUV maintaining a steady distance, neither speeding up nor falling back. A creeping unease settled in her gut. Something wasn't right, and then red and blue lights exploded behind her. The sharp wail of a siren shattered the quiet night, flashing lights bouncing off the wet road like warning signals. The patrol car sped up, swerving into her lane, forcing her to pull over. Olivia tightened her grip on the steering wheel, inhaling deeply. This wasn't her first time getting stopped, but something about this felt different, and she was about to find out why. Rain drizzled lightly against the windshield as Olivia glanced at the rearview mirror. The patrol car's door swung open. Mark Henderson stepped out. He was tall, about 6 feet 2 inches, heavy-set but moving with an unsettling ease. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, his face was rigid, expression unreadable, except for the cold certainty in his eyes. But what sent a sharper warning through Olivia wasn't his stare. It was the way his hand rested on his holstered gun. He didn't need the weapon to command authority, but he wanted her to see it. No greeting. No, "Ma'am, please roll down your window." No, "We have a minor issue here." Just the hard thud of a flashlight against her window, a sharp crack breaking the midnight stillness. "Step out of the car, now." His voice was honed like a blade, sharp, unwavering. Olivia met his gaze through the glass, reading his expression. She didn't rush. She didn't cower. "What's the reason for this stop, officer?" Henderson scoffed. "You asked too many questions." The words weren't a reprimand. They were a warning. Slowly, Olivia rolled down the window, keeping both hands visible on the wheel, a habit drilled into her from years of military training. "My license and registration are in the glove compartment," she said clearly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Henderson didn't respond, but his eyes flicked to her hands as she carefully reached for her documents. Then, snap! Henderson ripped the papers from her grasp. "Taillights out." The words dropped like a verdict that had already been decided. Olivia frowned. She knew for a fact her car was fine. It had been inspected just 2 weeks ago. This was an excuse. Henderson didn't care about the car. He cared about her. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Officer, I'm fairly certain my taillights are functional. If there's an issue, I'm willing to—" Click. The sound of a gun's safety disengaging. She looked down. Henderson had drawn his weapon. He wasn't aiming at her, but he held it low enough for her to see it clearly. A silent threat. "Step outside, office the car, now." Olivia's pulse slowed. She knew the situation had just escalated. She wasn't just dealing with an abusive cop. She was dealing with a man who believed he could do whatever he wanted. She took a breath, placed her hand on the door handle, and then she stepped out. The car door creaked slightly as it swung open, the sound barely audible in the quiet night. Olivia stepped out, hands raised, every movement measured and deliberate. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't afraid, but she also wasn't weak. She knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't a routine traffic stop. This wasn't a cop doing his job. This was a show of power, and he wanted her to submit. Henderson moved closer, his heavy boots scuffing against the damp asphalt, his gaze sharp as a blade, slicing through her as if he were assessing every inch of her. But what he didn't see was the danger hiding beneath her calm exterior. "Turn around, hands on the car." His voice was cold, absolute. Olivia kept her expression neutral, slowly turning as ordered, both palms pressing flat against the hood of her car. The metal was icy against her skin, a stark reminder. This situation could spiral out of control if she didn't handle it carefully. But what Henderson didn't realize was that she was already preparing. Analyze, calculate, anticipate. She could hear his heavy breathing behind her, feel the heat radiating off his body as he loomed closer. He was savoring this moment. He thought he was in complete control, and then, thud, out of nowhere. Henderson drove his knee hard into her lower back, a deliberate, vicious blow. Olivia had no time to react. The impact knocked her off balance, her body jerking forward, chin nearly slamming against the car's hood. A sharp, searing pain shot up her spine, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to make a sound. No warning, no justification, just raw violence. Before she could recover, strong hands yanked her wrists back. Snap! The handcuffs clamped around her wrists, metal digging in brutally tight, far beyond protocol. Olivia kept her breathing steady, though she could feel her pulse slowing, not from fear, but from the trained discipline of a soldier assessing the battlefield. Henderson leaned in close, his breath hot against her skin, laced with cigarettes and unchecked authority. "You think you're special, huh?" His voice was low, almost amused. Not a question, a warning. Olivia locked her jaw, keeping her face blank. She had heard these words before, from men who believed strength was measured in how much control they had over others, from those who had learned to abuse power rather than uphold it. Henderson thought she would break. He thought that a single knee to the back and a sharp-tongued threat would be enough to shatter her resolve. He was wrong. Olivia closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, not from fear, but to master the fury boiling beneath her skin. Anger wouldn't help her now, fear even less. She needed to wait. She needed him to believe he had won, because if there was one thing Olivia Carter knew better than anyone, it was how to make her enemies underestimate her. She had been captured before, but no one had ever been able to keep her. She had been tested before, but no one had ever made her break. She could feel the blood pulsing beneath her skin, where the cuffs bit too deeply into her wrists. With every passing second, Henderson grew more arrogant, and that meant he was making mistakes, because he didn't realize Olivia Carter wasn't the prey. She was the predator. Olivia sat still in the rigid plastic seat of the patrol car, her eyes fixed straight ahead, but her mind was anything but calm. The handcuffs bit deep into her wrists, the metal cold and unforgiving. The back seat had no seatbelt, deliberately removed to prevent detainees from stabilizing themselves. Her head rested lightly against the car's partition, her breathing steady, but inside adrenaline coursed through her veins. Something was wrong. In a routine arrest, a police officer was required to radio in immediately, to log the stop, confirm the charges, and announce their destination. Henderson did none of that. There was no radio call, no record of her name, no dispatch acknowledgement. No one knew where she was. Instead, Henderson reached over and switched off the radio, then threw the car into gear and drove off, the streetlights fading behind them. Olivia knew instantly this wasn't an arrest. This was a planned disappearance. The fear creeps in, but she holds the line. Olivia had heard of cases like this before. People stopped by the police, shoved into a cruiser, but never booked, never processed, never seen again. She had read the statistics. Now she was one of them. Henderson said nothing. He didn't need to. The way he gripped the steering wheel, the way he took each turn with calculated precision, the way he kept the sirens off. It all pointed to one thing. He was taking her somewhere no one would find her. Olivia clenched her jaw, forcing herself to suppress the anger rising in her chest. But anger wouldn't help her now. She needed to think. She needed to analyze. Wrong turn, wrong road, wrong plan. Outside the window, the green exit signs for Houston blurred past. If Henderson was truly taking her to the station, he should have taken exit 32, the direct route into the city. Instead, he turned right. Olivia narrowed her eyes, locking in the road. The pavement disappeared. The tires rumbled as they rolled onto a dirt road, uneven and rough. Thick trees loomed on both sides, the darkness swallowing them whole. No more streetlights, no more traffic, no more witnesses. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribcage, but her breathing remained unchanged. He was making a mistake. He thought she would panic. He thought she would beg, but he didn't know Olivia Carter didn't go down without a fight, a slim chance of escape. Olivia tested the handcuffs. Too tight, no way to slip out. She leaned sideways, checking the door handle. Locked. She shifted her weight, seeing if she could squeeze between the seats. Not enough space. Every route seemed blocked. And then, a spark of recognition flickered in her memory. She had read about this. A manufacturer's flaw. Her one way out. Some older patrol car models had a minor design flaw. The partition between the front and back seat wasn't always secured properly. In rare cases, a strong enough impact could loosen it, allowing detainees to push through. It had caused multiple complaints from officers because suspects had managed to slip into the front seat before, and right now, that flaw was her only chance. Olivia drew in a slow breath, adjusted her position, planting her feet firmly on the floor. She had one shot, one kick. If she failed, Henderson would immediately realize something was wrong. If she succeeded, she could get out. Olivia tensed her muscles, counted silently to 3, then thud. A forceful kick slammed into the partition, the sound echoing through the confined space. Nothing, but she didn't stop. Thud, thud. A crack sounded. Olivia felt the metal shift slightly. It was loose. She gritted her teeth, braced herself for one final kick. Crash! The partition snapped open. Her pulse surged with adrenaline, but she had no time to celebrate. She needed to move, fast. Henderson hadn't noticed yet. The car kept rolling deeper into the woods, further from civilization. But Olivia had no intention of letting this ride continue to its final stop. It was time to fight back. Olivia pressed herself against the seat, keeping her breathing slow and steady. Up front, Henderson's voice rumbled through the patrol car. Harsh, impatient. He was on the phone. She couldn't make out every word, but she could hear the tension in his voice. He wasn't sure. He was covering something up, and she could use that against him. If she wanted to survive, she had to act now. Olivia drew her legs back, planting her boots firmly against the floor, inhaling deeply. She had one shot, one kick. If she failed, Henderson would know and she wouldn't get another chance. She tensed every muscle, then, bam! A powerful kick slammed into the front seat. Crack! A sharp splitting sound echoed through the car. The partition buckled. The front seat jolted forward, creating an opening. Henderson whipped his head around, eyes wide with a mix of shock and rage. But it was too late. Olivia was already out of the car, a nightmare in the woods. Her boots hit the ground hard, knees buckling from the sudden drop, but she didn't stop moving. She had to run. Behind her, Henderson cursed loudly, then bang! A gunshot ripped through the night. The bullet wasn't aimed at her. It was a warning. Olivia gritted her teeth, sprinting toward the woods, her feet pounding against the wet earth. She couldn't run in a straight line. She had to disappear. Mud clung to her boots, each step dragging her down, but stopping wasn't an option. She threw herself into a ditch, her entire body sinking into the freezing mud. Her back pressed against the ground, keeping herself as low as possible. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. Now, darkness was her ally. Henderson hunts. A deadly game of cat and mouse footsteps crunched against the damp forest floor, slow and deliberate. He wasn't rushing. He knew she couldn't have gone far in these conditions. He was hunting her. A soft click echoed. He chambered another round. "You think you can escape me?" Henderson's voice cut through the stillness, not loud but laced with pure menace. Olivia tightened her core, forcing herself to control her breathing. She crouched behind a thick tree trunk, pressing her body close, her eyes tracking every movement. Henderson moved methodically, just a few feet from where she hid. The beam from his gun swept across the trees, flashing in quick bursts through the misty air. She could hear his breathing. He was trying to predict her next move. She had to throw him off. She had to do the unexpected. She remained completely still for a second, then slowly reached down into the mud, scooping up a handful of cold, wet earth. A faint rustling sounded deeper in the woods, a night bird taking flight, disturbing a few branches. Henderson snapped his head toward the noise. This was her chance. Olivia was ready to strike. Henderson moved slowly through the trees, gun in hand, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. His breathing was heavy but controlled. He still thought he was in charge. He believed Olivia was just another panicked fugitive, running blindly through the woods. But he was wrong. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting him. From prey to predator, Olivia crouched behind a thick tree trunk, her body low, every muscle coiled like a spring. She could hear Henderson just feet away, his boots crunching on damp leaves, his gun shifting in his grip. He had no idea where she was. Her fists clenched, mud still cold on her skin, her eyes locked onto her target. She had neutralized threats before, taken down enemies in combat. She knew exactly how to take down a man like Henderson, fast, precise, without hesitation. He took another step forward, now or never. Suddenly, Olivia exploded from the shadows like a panther. She snaked an arm around Henderson's throat, locking in a military-grade chokehold she had executed hundreds of times before. Henderson let out a strangled grunt, his body thrashing violently, but she held firm, tighter. She could feel his breath hitch, his grip loosening as he struggled for air. She drove him backward, using her full body weight to throw him off balance, his boots slipping on the muddy ground, and she didn't stop. Just as Henderson began to claw at her arm, Olivia twisted her hips, driving her fist into his jaw. Crack! His head snapped sideways, eyes going wide in pain. He was finished. Victory in seconds. Olivia's breathing was controlled, her body steady. He was done. But she wasn't taking any chances. Olivia grabbed the radio off his belt, flipping the switch and bringing it to her lips. Her voice was sharp, unwavering, unafraid. "This is Navy Major Olivia Carter. I have just been attacked by an armed officer. Request immediate backup." A tense silence crackled through the radio. Then, "Confirmed. Major Carter. Units are en route." The second she heard that, she knew she had won. The cost of corruption. Henderson groaned, one hand clutching his jaw, his eyes filled with rage and disbelief. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he could get away with anything. But tonight, he picked the wrong woman. He was still too stunned to react, but Olivia was already done with him. She could feel the ground tremble beneath her boots. Sirens wailed through the night. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees, painting streaks of color on the wet ground. Backup had arrived. Justice arrives. Within 5 minutes, 5 squad cars swarmed the scene, headlights blazing through the darkness, weapons drawn, orders shouted, "Drop the gun, hands where we can see them." Henderson had nowhere to run. He was pinned to the ground, his face pressed into the dirt, his own handcuffs securing his wrists. A fitting end. Olivia rose to her feet, breathing deep, eyes sharp and steady. She didn't need to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. The cold ground pressed against Henderson's cheek, his wrists locked tightly in handcuffs behind his back. The same position he had forced Olivia into just hours ago, but this time he wasn't the one in control. The bright floodlights of the patrol cars illuminated his fallen figure, boots crunching against the dirt as officers closed in around him. His breathing was ragged, filled with anger and humiliation. He muttered through clenched teeth, "You'll pay for this." Olivia looked down at him, her face devoid of fear, only quiet, unwavering victory. She let out a cold, knowing smile. "Number, you're the one who's going to pay." The trial. The truth exposed. 3 weeks later, in the county courthouse, all eyes were locked on the giant screen in the courtroom. The hidden patrol car camera played every second of the footage. Henderson abusing his power, pulling his gun, beating Olivia and trying to make her disappear. The prosecutor placed a thick case file on the table, then turned to the jury with an unwavering voice. "Mark Henderson is a dangerous abuser of power who does not deserve the honor of wearing a badge." Silence hung heavy in the room before the judge's gavel struck the desk. 15 years in federal prison. His career ended that very moment. Henderson didn't scream, didn't resist, but his defeat was written all over his face as he watched Olivia walk out of the courtroom, head held high, never looking back. No glory, only justice. A week later, at a press conference outside City Hall, the mayor of Houston stood at the podium, looking at Olivia with admiration. "Major Olivia Carter, this city owes you a debt of gratitude." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a medal of honor inside, but Olivia only glanced at it for a moment before shaking her head slightly. "I don't need recognition," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I only need justice." And then she stepped away, leaving behind the flashing cameras and the applause. Final message. Unchecked power is a dangerous weapon, and sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to fight it from within. On fire.